Hi, everyone. Welcome to Up Close and Empowered for another episode this week. I'm Sonna Johns, your host, and this is where I hope to inspire you to awaken to your true power because this is a show all about empowerment. And I have a very special show today with a very special guest who is very empowering. And when you hear her story and the challenges that she's gone through and how she's overcome them and what she's doing to live her purpose and give back, it's quite fascinating. So we're going to hear about that today. My guest, Lizabeth Olszewski, is a coach, author, and founder of a local charity that helps children of families affected by parental addiction. Now, she helps to help them find the support and the healing they need through an organization called Healing Hearts. Hearts Healing Horses, HHH. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that today. It's really beautiful. So, she helps individuals and groups discover their passions to live their purpose, and she draws from her own childhood challenges with alcoholic parents. So, what are some of the obstacles that she faced, and how did she overcome them? Her determination to rise above and make a difference led her to the creation of Core Growth, which is the name of her company, her LLC. And building on that experience, she created Horses Healing Hearts. And this is a charity that she has operated since 2009. She's the founder and executive director of HHH, and she is in South Florida. And this is the only program of its kind. This is the only one. And wait till you hear about it. It's just so beautiful how she has created this organization to help families or help kids of parental addiction. So she has helped over 600 families and 10,000 individuals in the last decade. Wow. Like that is a lot. There was also a short film called Without Wings that was made about the founding and success of the charity. And that made it to the Palm Beach International Film Festival, which was aired on PBS. She's also been interviewed by MSNBC Morning Joe, and she has had, I think, over 20 magazines and newspapers have done stories on her in the last 14 years. So this is really an accomplishment and a beautiful way that she is giving back. She has also been an advocate to a congressional task force on behalf of children of parental addiction and has addressed many other issues regarding family addiction. She has been published, like I said, in over 20 magazines. Her accolades go on and on. She sent me a list that was so long. I just, you're going to have to look her up and find out more about her. And she will share a little bit about that today, but there's just so much. So she's also a speaker. She's a presenter. She speaks at conferences, and she is very, very passionate about what she does. So Liz, I want to welcome you to the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Very humbled after I hear that. I'm like, I did all that, really?
Yes, yes. I always say that when times get tough or, you get overwhelmed, think about all the wisdom that you have and everything that you've gone through. Like celebrate yourself, celebrate what you've done. Because think about that. You probably don't even know all those accolades because you're just going, going, going. And then you hear them and you're like, wow, well,
Yeah,
that's something to really celebrate,
it
what
is.
you're doing. So tell
Yeah.
our listeners how you came to, create this organization. And but before that, I want you to tell them what childhood was like. Like, let's take them in a day of Liz as a child. Like, what did you go through and what were some of the obstacles and what led you to where you are today?
Right.
I know that's a big question. There's a lot
Yeah, it
there,
is.
but
But
we have a little time. We have a little time, so share what you
yeah,
can.
one thing I like to do is talk. So that's not a problem.
Okay, good.
So when I was young, I about 9 years old, we lived on a farm in Brookville, Ohio, and my mom was an alcoholic. My stepdad was an alcoholic. So I was really dorky looking. I had long, greasy, dark hair and buck teeth, and you can't imagine. But the biggest thing is I was very much, and I didn't realize it at the time, but always I felt like an electrical current was going through my body. I was just high strung. I look at pictures now of myself, and my fingernails are white, like where I'm gripping onto something. It's really strange.
Hmm.
Um, but every day was different, and that's part of what you struggle with being in a family with addiction is you don't know when the other shoe is going to fall. You don't know when you get off that bus, what are you walking into? Are they home? Is someone passed out? Are they fighting? Is the electric on? Do I have to ask my big brothers for, help with my homework? Who's going to make dinner? You literally, these kids are 40 years old inside of an 8-year-old body. And it's a shame. And, when I speak about addiction, both my parents are passed, but my mom was an incredibly generous, beautiful, talented woman. And it seems like such an oxymoron, but there's times, which I'll tell you later in the story, where she was deep in her addiction, but she would come out and say the most elegant, incredible, wise things. And it just seems like so opposite. It blows your mind, but it shows you how that person you love is still in there despite what's happening on the outside. So back to me, I have 2 older brothers, and we just got through. There were great times. My stepdad, even though he was an alcoholic, he was very funny, very charming. He was very big on grammar and very big on teaching us how to write correctly. Um, Fascinating, a whole nother show, but his father actually escaped, I think before or after World War II on a Bolshevik. He was best friends with Igor Sikorsky, the helicopter founder. I mean, incredible. But he
Wow.
grew
So
up
he
a
sounds
lot
like a
with,
perfectionist. He was like
yeah,
a very,
a lot of
was he
trauma.
controlling? Was he very
Yeah.
controlling?
When he would go in and out of phases. He was very just a huge stature, big gray eyebrows. One of the stories I tell in the movie is when we were moving in, he did not like things made of plastic. And I think this came from his dad and the whole communist, whatever. But we backed this pickup truck up and all our toys are there. And I see him kind of like conferencing with mom. And then he walks over to us and he squats down and he says, "Kids, we're going to have a bonfire tonight. It's like a welcome to the farm." And we're like, great. But what we didn't know is he was burning our toys.
Mm.
He literally picked up a G.I. Joe doll off the back top of the truck and looked at it and went, "This is for a boy. Like, what is happening?" He just was appalled. So literally off the back of the truck, it was like 2 piles formed, anything that was wood and metal and useful, and anything that was a toy or plastic or whatever. And sadly, we were so scared of him. We were like, "Okay, yeah, I can remember just
Wow.
watching my toys go up in flames and like
Oh my
wanting to
God.
cry, but almost being afraid.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 6 or 7, because I was born in 70, and I can remember and then the next day, this just blows your mind. One of my best birthdays ever, they went out and cleaned out this garden shed, pulled all the stuff out of it and painted it bicentennial because it was 1976 and surprised me. And I walked in and was like, and to this day, that was my favorite birthday. So you had such extremes that it was, and that's what happens to our body is our adrenaline is always on. The chemicals are just constantly going, and our bodies aren't designed that way. And that is what sets the stage. I don't know if you've heard, but there's this thing called ACEs, childhood experiences. And it's a 1 to 10 score. And if you anything over like 5 plus, take 10 years off your life.
Is
We're
that caused from fight or flight, from the
Yeah, the
uncertainty?
adrenaline, the cortisol. So
Wow.
it's a lot of, diabetes, cancer, all of these diseases
Really?
have set the stage by these stress hormones constantly being on our body.
That is so interesting. But think about a 7-year-old watching their toys being burned. I mean, that in itself is very traumatic. I
Mhm.
mean, think about like what would be going through your head. I mean, I can't even imagine. And then the next day it was the best birthday ever. So the range is just
It
very
is.
traumatic. It really is. And you don't know what to expect. So always being in that fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
not knowing what to expect is what leads us to have that uncertainty. And what else in our life? Tell us what else that can lead to, what you've
Yeah. So
experienced.
what's interesting too about my father is he had it on the opposite. He was my mentor. He would teach me how to do things. He was a very natural teacher, very, very intelligent. Um, so what happens is you have this dichotomy happening inside of you that as adults, it's difficult for us to be around people with addictions. As a child, you grow up and you learn, and no one ever told us this, but we learn don't talk, don't trust, don't feel.
Hmm.
Talking and trusting, very dangerous.
Wow.
The
Wow.
feeling, we just end up shutting down. And remind me when we get to it, but there's a very specific story I want to tell about one of our participants. When I said that, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, and she literally raised her hand, and I'll tell that story later. But
Okay.
self-protection, it's a coping mechanism, and it's not healthy because when you can only do that for so long, and that's why there's a generational cycle of addiction, because we stuff and stuff and stuff. And then if we never find a healthy outlet, if we don't find healthy, adults to help us, or a YMCA or a teacher who takes us under the wing, if none of those things happen, all we know is what we've learned in that home. And what we've
Right.
learned is how you deal with your feelings is you drink them away, or you drug them away, or you do anything to mask that pain. So we're not taught, feelings are okay to talk about, or you could go do sports or work out or really get thrown into music, whatever. So we repeat the cycle because we don't know any other way to numb and keep those feelings down. And they're just too painful, and they don't stay down. They come out eventually.
Right. It's got to lead to a lot of depression and sadness and confusion. I've got to,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I can only imagine.
Hmm.
Wow. So, what else led you to like take us into your teens? So that was when you were
Yeah.
7. What about when you were 15, 16? What were things
So
like?
my pivotal life point, which kind of ties right into HHH, is when I was 12. My stepdad Ivan sent me to Pennsylvania to his sister's house. Who she's a concert pianist, and she's Aunt Susie, and she had rescued a Mustang horse. His name was Jonathan, and
Oh,
I paralleled and connected with this horse. I mean, I remember the outside of his body had these little gray scars from where he had tried to escape through a barbed wire fence. And I must be 12, and I'm standing there in the pasture going like, okay, the outside of your fur, you have scars on the outside, I have scars on the inside. And you've been rescued and done amazing things. And I just want that chance. So we
wow.
just, and my aunt to this day, she visited last week, and she said, Liz, I was a nervous wreck because Jonathan doesn't like people. And I knew when he started accepting you and took care of you when you were riding, he was carrying himself in a different way because he knew you didn't have the skills. And she said he just connected with you. So that I say this many times when I speak. That moment in time was the first time in life that I wanted to go towards something instead of always away. It's always, how do I get away from the drunk? Where do I hide? Where do I do? It's always away. But this was going towards. So fast forward, I go home after that summer, and my mom is given 6 months to live because of severe liver disease.
Mhm.
And at that time, we thought it ended up, she made it longer than that. But my aunt, who was not even my natural blood aunt, it was my mother's brother's ex-wife, decided to take me in. And so from the age of like 13 through college, I lived with her. My brothers were old enough to go out on their own. Um, Mom did not like that. She was kicking and screaming about signing those custodian papers over. And they basically cornered her and said, look, if you don't, we're going to go to children's services. And when we did live with her after we left the farm, we lived in some pretty scary, we lived in homes with no toilet, no heat. I mean, there was frost on the inside of it. It was Ohio, so it was cold.
Hmm.
And the water smelled like sulfur. We had 2 kerosene heaters and a coal buck stove, but it was, when you're growing up like that too, is you've got to spin your story in a way that you can kind of control it. So, and mom was really funny too. She'd say, it's like we're camping, I'm like, nobody at school camps like this, like really,
Wow.
but you just got through it. So that was that. So I got home, and that was, my mom, as much as she had a disease, she's my mom. She was the closest person
Yeah.
I had her in my life. So she ended up living another 10 years. She
Wow.
died
Oh
when
my
I was
gosh.
24. Yeah, I made it through college. My real father never paid child support. He wasn't around. I spoke to him on the phone maybe 6 or 7 times. I met him once when I was 18 in college. He was 13 years older than my mom, also very charming. When they were younger, she looked like Liz Taylor, and he looked like Clark Gable.
Wow.
When they would go places, it
Hmm.
was just, and she sang, and he worked for CBS broadcasting.
Hmm.
Um, so let's see, I met him, graduated from college, got married to a man I was married to for 23 years. Ironically, he lives in my building.
Oh
People
my
are
gosh. Oh my gosh.
like, um, but so yeah, so she passed and that was devastating.
But
And
you
I
had
can
a
remember
strong, you said you had a strong love for your mom, even though you knew that she was suffering and she had her own issues. So how did that feel?
I can remember a time in the rest home where she went back and forth. She really had a stroke, a brain bleed because of the quality of her liver. And anything they tried to give her for the stroke, her body couldn't metabolize because her liver was shot. But I remember coming in one time, I was working for Dayton Power and Light at the time, and I walked in and she looked at me and she looked so confused. And she said, "You look just like my daughter." And I took these papers and I went over and she was in the wheelchair and I hit her on the head and I said, "You dumbass, I am your daughter." I was so
Oh,
hurt. And so she looked at me and she started saying, "If half of her face is drooping because of the stroke."
yep.
She says,
Hmm.
"If you can take me to the," and she started giving these complicated terms, not like right, left, right. It was complicated. And I kind of ignored it. And she gave them again, and they were the same turns. And I thought, I'm going to write these down. And I don't know where she's talking about, but so I take the directions down. I walk it. It's an exit door. I open the door, liquor store.
Mm, wow.
And it hit me then.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? She does not even know her own daughter, but she knew
Oh,
complicated direct. That tells you how deeply embedded in the brain. And I remember
yes.
walking back to her bed and going, I never had a chance. Like us
Right.
kids were trying to compete with this bottle, and we just never had.
Yes. Yes.
So
That's
she
so
died
true.
shortly thereafter, but and I can remember when we didn't have money for her to really even have a full funeral. We had to cremate her,
Mm,
and I went in to see her body, and my brothers are like, "You should not do this. You're gonna cry, and it's gonna be a mess." And I
mhm,
went in, and I've actually gone through a lot of EMDR about this because it was a
mhm.
very, very tragic memory of what gets sealed when you're in such a traumatic state.
Sure.
And as I went through EMDR, I really changed the story, which helped
Mhm,
me
mhm.
heal. And the story became, no matter what happened with you, mom, somehow you taught me grace and elegance and the right way to live. And I'm going to take the torch now. Because if
Right.
I don't make a
Wow.
meaning of this, I'll lose my mind.
That's
So that's
powerful.
just
That's
how it culminated.
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. I can only imagine. So I want to continue on that. We're going to take a short break and I want to hear a little bit more about that and also that pivotal point with the horse and the connection and how it really, you know, brought you to where you are today, like that connection. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, but thank you so much for sharing this story so far. So we're going to take a short break and we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to Up Close and Empowered with Sonna Johns. Have a question for Sonna or her guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show.
Hi, everyone. We're back to the show, and we are talking about children and kids that grow up in families with addiction. And we're talking to Liz Olszewski, who has founded the organization Horses Healing Hearts. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And before the break, she was talking about how her mom had, a problem with alcohol and that it was extremely hurtful and painful for her, and that it has kind of been with her her whole life, right? And that you've had to go through certain ways to kind of heal through it, but you made a choice to heal through it. You've made those steps to work through it, and you were empowered enough to not allow this to keep you down, right?
Mhm.
So resilience, I mean, courage, bravery to do what you do, really, Liz.
Yeah, it was a
And
process though. In the beginning, I wasn't like that. And I was in a woe is me. And you just figure out people get tired of hearing it, so you're like, I
right.
have some options.
Well, listen, we all go through the victim mode to some degree, but the difference is that we all have a choice. We all have a choice to heal and find a way to navigate through all the hardship, all all of the things that affected us. And you've done that. And now you're helping other people do the same. And I know before the break, you were talking about how you just, you knew your mom had the issue and she really had a problem, but you loved her and you took what you could from her, like what you learned from her, and you kind of cherished that, which is great. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned also before the break about the EMDR. So there are several different type of therapies, modalities that people can use after experiencing something like this. And you said the EMDR was very helpful for you.
Yes, it literally, I was shocked at how quickly it worked,
Hmm.
but it makes sense in the way that the nerves just get stuck when they're fired, when something's incorrect, and it happens that way, and then they just fall where they're supposed to. And it was just, that whole process was fascinating. And I didn't do a lot of them, but it was like magic. And it's not
Wow.
immediate, but you feel it it's I don't know what the word is. It's like latent. It keeps the benefits keep happening. It's crazy, but
That's
very.
great. Yeah. And it's a process, right? It's all a process. And do you go off track? Do you have bad days? I mean, tell us what it's like if you have a bad moment or you have a trigger. Like, what does Liz do?
Oh, what's funny, because being a coach, we have all the right answers, but it's
Yeah.
really not
Hey,
about
you know
us.
what?
The
We've
coach,
lived it. We've lived
the
it. That's a good
clients
thing.
have the answers. We just ask the right questions. But of course, I mean, if I don't have the right people around me to call, I just to call and I say, do you need to talk? I mean, not literally on the ledge, but they know, and I'm very direct. The first thing is I say is I need to vent, and you need to just bring me back to reality, because sometimes you do want to get it out. It's a fine line. You don't want to wallow in it too much. But I have, just in the last 2 months or 3 months, it's been horribly challenging. A lot of things happening at once. And when I look at that, I personally say, I think God is preparing me for something, because it gets really dark. And I get in a
Mhm,
place, I also have ADHD, so I struggle with procrastination. And then I beat myself up because I didn't do something. So it's like this whole vicious cycle.
mhm,
But
mhm.
yeah, if I didn't have a dog, I think there'd be days I'd stay in my apartment, but I've got to take him out.
Right, right.
So I
Well, you're
hermit.
taking action, okay? And you're allowed to have those off days. You're taking action and you've lived this experience so you are able to help other people. And I'm sure it makes you feel good helping other people when you do your personal coaching. And we're going to talk about
Right.
your foundation in a minute, but it's got to make you feel good, right? That you're helping
Mhm.
them and you can totally relate because you've been there.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's pivot a little bit
Mhm.
about the horse connection and how this was a pivotal moment in your teens where a light went on and how that led you to, create this organization, the Horses Healing Hearts, to help kids that were like you. So tell us
Mhm.
about.
So when I met Jonathan, I didn't know I'd be doing this. I think what happened,
And
fast forward,
Jonathan's the horse. We got to tell people
Jonathan's
in
the
case they
horse.
came on after the break.
Yes.
And it's like a regular person's name. So it's kind of
It
funny
is.
to
It's
hear
so
that the horse's name
confusing.
is Jonathan, which I love. So Jonathan is the horse. Okay, go on.
Yes, yes. So, growing up poor, I just immediately thought that I knew that money would solve everything. So I chased money from college until my husband of 23 years, now divorced, but we built a lot of businesses together, a chain of tanning salons in Ohio, and big chains. Like, one of the stores had 42 beds. I mean, they weren't small.
Wow.
And then we sold them. And, at the time we moved here to Florida about 20 years ago, and I think we netted like $2 or $3 million. At that time, it still wasn't a lot of money, but to me, I'm like, I'm a millionaire. This is
Right,
insane.
right.
And I remember sitting out in the car at the closing in Chicago and going, I don't feel any different. Like, shouldn't I feel different?
Mm,
But we figured out that you still have problems. Yeah, you have money,
yes.
but now everything, again, it's your lens, it's your perspective. Before, when we didn't have money, if somebody threatened to sue us, we're like, get in line. We have, there's a very freeing thing that now you have money, you have something to lose. You're like, oh. So
Right.
anyways, I made the realization that money didn't fill that hole. I got an expensive
Yes.
dressage horse and I loved him, and we actually ran out of the money pretty quickly and had to start over. But the moral to that story is, and Tony Robbins says this, and when it's like, I put my ladder against a building and I spent so many years climbing that ladder to get at the top and go, it's the wrong building. Are you kidding me?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that
So,
analogy. So
yeah,
true. So
it's
true.
insane.
So we
So
think
then,
it's all money. We think that money is the
yeah.
answer to everything, but the problems are still there. It's still, you have to find out how to work through those problems. And if
Mhm.
you're not working through them, sometimes you go through all the money, like you said.
Yeah, truly. But I remember being in the barn one day, and another Tony Robbins is a huge mentor of mine. Another exercise he does is called the rocking chair test, and it's kind of morbid, but it's like visualizing your funeral. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, who would be there? And as I'm imagining and going through it, everybody's coming up to the casket and they're going, she was so nice. She was a good balance to stand, my ex. And I'm like, what? Like, I wasn't put on this earth to be a balance weight to somebody, like and then it hit right then, like, I want to leave a legacy. I want something to live on beyond me, that it doesn't matter if one person comes or 400 people come to that this thing just outlives me. So then I thought of his thing, like, think of where you were happiest in your life. And it was in that pasture with Jonathan.
Oh,
And then I kind of
okay.
got this visualization of, you drop a rock in like a pond and you see those ripples.
Mm-hmm.
And it hit me that, does Aunt Susie know? And at this time I hadn't started it, but does she know the impact she had on me? Because she was just 1 or 2 summers and, so
Right.
then I start getting this idea, and we heard at church one time there was a place where you could go and help sidewalk for the horse with the autism and this and that. So I was doing that. And I remember I was doing it for like 3 months. And one day back up a minute. One of the things Tony asks us to do is ask yourself the right question. So initially I was writing a book and I thought, this is just too personal to put out. I'm not this vulnerable. So
Mm-hmm.
the question was, how can I help the kids? Because that's what the book was intended to do, and involve horses, because that's my passion. So that was the question. And it had been a few months, and I was getting out of the car to volunteer, and I looked over, and at that time, the logo for autism was the little puzzle piece that floats away. And I saw the bumper sticker, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I'm like, if horses help kids with autism and they helped me, why can't they help children of addiction?
Wow,
We're
wow,
1 in
wow.
4.
I love that. Oh
And
my
it just hit
gosh. It
me,
was
and I
like an
went,
aha.
it was the seed. And now I understand when he says, if you ask your brain the right question, it won't immediately, but that's what happens when we go, why am I so fat? Why am I so, your brain's going to come up with an answer. Flip your questions. So
Right.
how can I do this and involve this? Because so I went home, I started researching it. I told my husband that this is what I was going to do. And he said, have you looked it up online? Is anybody doing it? I'm like, no. And he says, well, maybe there's a reason. Like, maybe it's not a good idea. And I'm like, forget you, I'm doing it anyway.
Right.
My girlfriends thought it was insane. It was the worst financial 2009. It was bad. And one of my friends did say something really pivotal that I think she was right. And that was, why are you going to put addiction in the name? Like, why can't you just say troubled kids, kids at risk?
Mhm.
Why do you have to say addiction? Because think about it, these parents are going to be coming and they're going to have a label over their head. And it just, something in me wanted to keep that in the name. And I said, you know why? Because I started healing when I was honest about it.
Mhm.
And, my aunt had gotten me this book, and I was going to school with it face down about being a child of an alcoholic. And one day I flipped it up. I don't know why, but I just got the nerve to flip it up. The teacher saw it. She tapped me and said, come see me after class. And she said, we have a group of kids that are going through similar things. It's led by another teacher, not even a therapist or counselor. Do you want to join? And I said, absolutely. And I remember walking in that room, and there was probably 20 kids, and there was at least one representative from each social clique, the jocks, the bandoids, the geeks, the whatever. And I thought, there's no way that we all are struggling with this. And we were.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
knew. So that moment when I decided to get honest is when I started to heal. So I thought, in going
Wow.
forward, it has kind of hurt me because there is such a stigma. I was at a party one time, and I was trying to tell this guy what we do. And he looked at me and goes, so wait, let me get this right. you're trying to get me to give you money for drunks kids to have pony rides.
Mm.
And I went, never mind.
Yeah,
I
never
was
mind,
like,
never mind, right.
that conversation's gonna be. So there's such a stigma that, so anyways, I started
So
it.
that
We
was
had
one of the obstacles, but you kept going.
that was one of them, yeah.
Mhm.
And I didn't have a place. So I got online. Another thing Tony says, just don't reinvent the wheel. Find somewhere that's doing it and do it like
Mm.
them. So I found a lady in California, a place called Horses in the Hood. Her name is, oh, it's escaping me, Kathy Kuzner, incredible woman in her own right. And she just takes these kids and allows them to go to different farms for weeks of the summer.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, I'll do that concept. So I had a horse and I knew some area barns. So I went to 3 different barns and I said, look, this is what I want to do. We don't have insurance. I can't pay yet, but blah, blah, blah. And all of them said, you know what, let's just start it and see what happens. And, you know,
Right.
so that's how we
Wow.
started. Yeah.
So
Incredible.
what is the camp like? Tell us like the kind of kids that are there, the ages,
Sure.
and what are they experiencing when they're there?
So anybody who I explain this to, because again, it's so different, even though we've been here 14 years. Think of, do you remember the movie Breakfast Club?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Too young of people say they don't. I'm like, I don't even want to talk
Right.
to you. So
Oh,
there's Breakfast Club meets Pony Club meets Alateen. So
mm,
Alateen is for the kids under Al-Anon. So
yeah.
think of those 3 things together. So they're there for 2 hours every other Saturday. When they first get there, and the small group might be 4 kids up to 10 kids, any range, but they all know that everybody sitting in that circle is going through one of their parents, if not both of their parents, are struggling with addiction. They might be in early recovery. And a fourth of those kids don't have parents. Their parents have either died of liver disease or cancer or
Mm,
suicide, or they're just
wow.
missing.
Right.
Um,
So they know
so
they're not alone.
yes, and that's the biggest thing. And
Mhm.
so we start out with just doing highs and lows for the week. And a high might be,
Mm.
I got an A on a test, and a low might be, my dad's on life support. He overdosed last
Right.
night.
Right.
And then we go to an actual session exercise that helps us through these different topics. It's basically building life skills. And then they all go out, take turns writing, and then they come back and we close it with what are 3 words from today? And that kind of gives us a check-in point. So we know that when they leave, you know, kind of where they're
Mhm.
at emotionally. Um, the kids do not have a certain amount of time that they can come, you know, part of our granting issue is that the funders say that you're making a depth of impact, but not a breadth of impact, because kids can be here for 8-10 years. And one of our best um, kids who's graduated, our best, like, what's the word, poster children, if you will,
Mhm.
Tiffany, she came for 10 years. Um, so
Right. So you're counseling, you're supporting them, and they're also feeling that connection with the horses.
yeah, and that was one of the things. I don't know how we're doing on time, but that,
We're gonna take a break in about a minute, but we got about a minute, so
okay, so I'll
we can
make it.
always end. I mean, we can also pick it up after the break.
Yeah. So when I did the don't talk, don't trust, don't feel thing, we were saying when you're around horses, they're prey animals. So if you're not authentic internally, if this and this don't match, the horse won't connect with you.
Mm,
We said don't, if you know, if you can't be honest with your feelings. And a 13-year-old girl rose her hand and she said, I don't remember how to feel.
oh,
And I
yeah.
went, so I said, keep coming back. And the first 2 weeks after that, nothing really significant happened. But the third week, she started bawling. She's with this horse, just brushing the mane. And I come up and I said, what's going on? And she stops mid cry and she looks at me and she looks at the horse's eye and she says, are my tears upsetting the horse? And I said, no, because they're authentic. But if you'd hold them back, he would not
Mhm.
be okay with that. So afterwards, she came up to
Excuse me.
me and she said, I feel lighter all over my body.
Oh my gosh. So she was releasing all of that pain and everything that had been built up, right?
Mhm,
And she hadn't been able to express for all
mhm,
that time.
mhm. When the
Wow.
words started, she said the words were coming to her and she said, it's like the floodgate opened. They were happy, they were sad, she goes, I
Mhm.
can't even label them all. I'm like, don't worry about it. Just be, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing what the support and what the right things can do to help us heal through things, especially kids.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and so they can visit as much as they want, or you're
Well,
basically
they
you have a stable of horses. It's like a farm,
Yeah, so
or
we don't own it. It's owned by someone and we've been, Delray Beach is the one we've had for 14 years that we go to. So we pay during the time we're there. We have a little clubhouse that they've built for us and we pay to use the horses based on the number we use.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's how, and it's a much more fiscally responsible way to do it. We did it out of necessity in the beginning, but if somebody gave me a barn tomorrow, I wouldn't take it because it's just too expensive to have your own horses. It's
Right, right. Okay, well, I want to hear a little bit more. We're going to take a quick break, but I want to talk about some of the new things that you have going, what's exciting coming up, how people can get a hold of you. And I want to talk about Al Anon for a minute because I know that I have some listeners that are going to Al Anon, and that, you know, we know how supportive that group is and how it can help people. And so let's talk a little bit more about that after the break.
okay.
Okay, so thank you. We'll be right back after this. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. So, Liz, before the break, we were talking about Al Anon and some of the things that people could do to get help. And what do you want your listeners and our listeners and watchers to know? Where can they get help? We can talk about Al Anon for a second. Also, if there's other ways that they can reach out, like where do they look? Where do they go? What is a, what are some different avenues that people can take that might be in these situations?
So the first one that comes to mind that's excellent and it's been around 40 years is National Association for Children of Addiction, and it's called NACOA. And they, some of the board members that we have actually were co-founders of that 40 years ago. So that's an incredible resource. It has a section where parents can learn to talk to their kids about it. It's just a wealth of information. Al-Anon, Alateen. The biggest thing that I see with, the healthy people that are not using, or the codependent is what we call it, is they're so busy taking care and trying to set the stage and keep things from falling apart that they don't put their oxygen mask on. And then
Right.
you tell them, you've got to help I don't have time to help myself. And I'm like, you can't afford not to. Like, it's only
Exactly.
going to be
Exactly.
so many, more days before. What good are you if you're out? Like, you can't do anything.
Hmm.
So,
What are some of the key codependency characteristics of this?
and I call myself I'll be a codependent the rest of my life. I'm just constantly in recovery. We want to help everybody. We overcommit. We have weak boundaries. We don't want people to be upset with us. Um, that that's mostly, I mean, what's honestly the work that I've done with horses has really helped me with boundaries. I've read a
How
lot of
so? How so?
how so?
Yes. How
Horses
so?
will test your boundary instantly. And if they can't trust you to protect them, they'll either leave you or they'll take advantage of you. So they're kind of like kids. Like when you start
Hmm.
walking with them, they'll kind of get in your personal space and test you. And if you don't know enough to kind of nudge them out or say my space or do something, they'll get you going in a circle. Like, because they're lazy. They don't want to cover ground. So they'll just keep doing left turns until until you're going to get stepped on. So we watch this happen from afar, and then we'll come up and we'll say, so what's happening? And I don't know, he's huge. I'm scared. I don't blame you. I would be scared too. But once you share, I always say, children do this too. The horse does not know how strong the fence is unless he leans on it. So until we get leaned on, we don't know. And
Hmm.
kids want boundaries as much as they complain about
Right.
them. If you remember, it's always the teacher who exactly what is expected of you, the one that you
Yes.
like. So
We don't
boundaries,
like them, but they keep us in line. They keep us in
yeah,
track, and they
we
avoid
respect them.
all conflict. I mean, if we just, we all need them.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to have them.
And I love what Brene says. She says boundaries are kind. What happens is when we're afraid to put them down, and then we just get walked on, and then we get resentful, and then we explode. That's when we look at
Right.
boundaries as being bad. Well, what if we did it a lot earlier and we didn't have to be so explosive? And we just said, you know what, that makes me kind of uncomfortable. Can we do this instead of that? Or what do you think of, how can anybody complain about that? you know?
Right. Well, that is an indicator when we're resentful or we're angry, because sometimes we do tolerate too much and then we get so upset at ourselves for doing it. So there's an indicator right there. We need to set a boundary.
Mhm.
And it's being kind to ourselves and kind to others as well, because then there's less confusion.
Yep.
So, what are you working on now? Anything exciting? What's in the forefront for you?
So now, well, the most important thing we have an event coming up April 11th in Delray Beach at the BMW dealership, which is our 10th, no, our 10th annual, even though we've been around for 14 years, called Denim and Diamonds. And that would be great if folks can come up to that. It's on our website. I am writing a book on ADHD that is not a clinical book, and I honestly don't want to say too much about it, but it's a fun book. And I have the coaching business. Um,
Are
yeah,
most of your clients on a personal basis, are they from alcoholic families or addictive families?
a lot of them are, but a lot of them I think are from kind of a perfectionistic family too. You know, the
Right.
dynamics sometimes are the same. I have primarily women and a lot of women who are at that point in their life where they want to find out what their purpose is. Like one of my
Mhm.
favorite sayings, I think it's Mark Twain, is the two best days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why.
Yes, yes. I think you're right, though. A lot of people are in that space right now where they wanna know, what is their legacy going to be?
Mhm,
What do they wanna do? What is their purpose? And what's most important in our lives, right?
mhm. And you make a
And
life and not a living.
exactly. And in your case, I mean, you've built a legacy already. I mean, your legacy will go on and on and on. I mean, you are totally creating a ripple effect for sure.
If we stay funded. That's the hard
Well,
part is chasing the money every year, but that's okay. It's part of it.
yeah, and it just kills me sometimes because, like, even if everybody just gave a little bit, like, everybody
Mhm,
just gave a little bit, it would add up, and it would be such a big help to kids that have no control over this.
mhm.
They have no control. They were born into this, and they have no control over it.
People have heard of us, but I really underestimated when I started this how much education it would take to get people because they know about us, but they don't really know. All they know is horses and kids. They don't know which population.
Mhm.
So it's we'll get there. You know, this year we had MSNBC and Women's World Magazine, 1.6 million subscribers. And I was telling my board, like,
Right.
the money's gonna roll in. And it's a lot of exposure, but the money doesn't roll in. You have to,
Yeah,
it
you
gives you
gotta
a lot of
keep out there.
credibility. But we're super thankful for all of that. But I've always envisioned being on Oprah and all that stuff. And it's like, you just never know what's going to work. So you got to do, and that's part of where I get frustrated and start to quit on myself is fundraising is not my gig. Like I can go and tell stories, as you can see, all day long, but finding the leads, setting them
Right.
up, stewarding them after, that is just, I give myself a
Yeah.
decrease. So
Mhm. It's a lot. It's a lot, and I'm sure that your passion drives you. I mean, you're so passionate about what you do, you've lived it, and you wanna help others, and you find a way to do it, and I know it's not easy.
Mhm.
I'll tell you that article was really impressive, The Best Women in Business for 2024. That was really a great article on you. So you've got
Thank
some great
you.
press and media out there for sure. So Liz, what would you tell your younger self?
Mm. Oh gosh, it makes me emotional to think about
That's
this.
okay. We got a
Much
we got a little bit of time. You can get all emotional
as
as
much
much as you
healing as you
want.
think you
But what would
do.
you tell your younger self? I mean, based on everything that you've gone through and what you've seen and what you're still continuing to go through, because you said you're
Right.
still on your healing journey, which we really all are. We're all
Mhm.
evolving. We're all on a healing journey. It's never ending.
Yeah. I would say be kinder to yourself
Mhm.
and slow down. Just
Yeah.
slow down.
Yes, that comes out of a lot of people's mouths, like, seriously, that have gone through this type of thing, that they're just slow down, and really, we all need to slow down to be more present anyway, right? So
Mhm.
what else have you learned? Like, slow down, and what are a couple other things?
Be mindful, be in the moment. I earlier in my life, I was more depressed than anxious. now I'm more anxious than depressed. I think I've always had a little bit of both,
Mhm.
but the being with the horses has been so beneficial because you have to be mindful. It's a safety thing. And
Right.
they force us to be mindful, and that is really difficult for me. And part of what I see with my coaching business too is people want to talk about authenticity, but they don't want to do the vulnerability that's necessary for authenticity. And when you start
Yeah.
talking about it, you see the body language and people get uncomfortable. And we tell the clients who come through, and I do a lot, as you can tell, Brene Brown, but vulnerability is courage. And for
100%.
vulnerability to take place, two things have to happen. One, the unknown, and two, the lack of ability to control the outcome.
That is it right there. That last one really resonates because you really have to be able to say it, do it, and be it without having control of the outcome and wanting to control the outcome.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
that is
can give
so
it to God a
powerful.
lot. I give it to God and I feel so free. And then I
Yeah.
go, I have a board meeting. What am I going to say? I gave it to God. Like, what
I
does
know,
that
I know. I do
even
that. I
mean?
do that all the time. It's like,
That
I'm like,
doesn't
hand it
fly.
over to God, hand it over to God. I hear you, but you're like, you can't do that in some corporate
Right,
settings,
right.
obviously. I mean, some, you can, but there's many that you
Yeah.
can't. But things are changing slowly,
Mhm.
but surely they're changing. So biggest life lesson, like what is one thing that you look back and you're like, wow, that was the biggest lesson I had to learn?
Oh, thinking how I can say this and not get myself in trouble. Um,
Vulnerability.
yeah, right. Um, Forgiveness
Mm,
and letting go,
love that.
even
I
after you
love
feel
that.
betrayed. And
Yes, yes. Betrayal
there's always
is
another
deep.
story. Like, we feel betrayed because we know our side of it, but we could be much happier if we ever tried to put ourselves in there. We wouldn't take it so personal. We'd say, what?
Right,
They did it because of XYZ. And then it's like, oh,
right. But we're
uh,
human. We're still going to feel it, but it does help
yeah,
us to understand so that we can kind of lighten it a little bit and not feel the blow as much, be more understanding, more compassionate.
yeah,
So I love that letting go and forgiveness, which is one of the most, it's so important. It's crucial. And it is one of the hardest things to do. But like we just said a minute ago, we can give it over to God
mhm.
and right and forgive. So we're winding down last few minutes. I want people to know where the best place is for them to reach out to you because I know you have several social media sites, you've got
Yeah.
websites, you've got Facebook, you've got so many things. What maybe one or two places where they can reach out to you?
Okay. So I'm going to give my phone number.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
561-713-6133. And then I guess I'll give the HHH email because that's easy. So it's liz@hhhusa.org.
Okay. And you do have you're active on LinkedIn, right? And
Mhm.
Facebook are your
Mhm.
two active social medias?
Correct.
Okay. So people can also look there. And then if they
Mhm.
want to help or they want to find out more about your organization, they can just go to those places
Yeah,
and
there
reach
or
out.
even like the website is just hhhusa.org. It's easy. Um, be careful when you get on, not careful, but there are a lot of horses healing hearts around. So
Okay.
yeah,
So yours is HHH, Horses Healing Hearts.
so it's
What's
hhhusa.org. But if you just put in
okay.
horseshealinghearts.com or whatever, it's going to take you to a place in California. People were giving money that meant to give to us.
Oh my gosh.
We
Well,
had
we
to
need
hire
to
an
make
attorney.
sure that we're giving it to the right Horses Healing
Right, right.
Hearts with
In
Liz
Delray Beach,
Olszewski.
Boynton Beach.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and thank you for all that you're doing. It's just, you're making a difference, and I know it's not easy, and I know that you fall down and you're getting back up. I know the story, and I commend you for everything that you're
Thank you.
doing. So,
Thank
yeah,
you
and
for having me. I
oh,
enjoyed it.
you're so welcome. I mean, if it helps even a few people, it's a big deal. And I think it's going to help a lot. So, people will be able to access this on the Voice America platform, and they'll also be able to watch it on my YouTube, and then also just look it up and Google it. And it'll also be on Amazon and, all of the podcast platforms as well, if they want to listen to it again or even refer a friend.
Great.
So I want to thank everybody for listening this week. I appreciate it. And I'm Sonnalife, Sonnalife.com. I'd like to hear from you if you'd like to work in any capacity or just give me some feedback. And, Love to hear from you. Sonnalife.com. My Instagram handle is at Sonnalifecoach. And Liz Olszewski, thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today. I really appreciate you. And again, thanks for all that you're doing. So
All right.
everybody have a great week.
Yeah, take care.
Okay.